1. The child beneath, twin suns in, the silence between heartbeats. I remember the beginning. It was not the beginning of the galaxy, not the beginning of the Force, only the beginning of his path. The sands of Tatooine were endless, each grain a shard of time, each dune a wave in a sea of heat and hunger. Beneath the twin suns, a boy lived in chains. His name was Anakin, but in the Force he was not yet named. The current that moved through him was vast, untamed, dangerous. He worked in the shadow of machines. Metal and dust clung to his skin. His hands bled on sharp edges, yet he smiled when things came alive under his touch. Scrap became flight. Rust became speed. He dreamed of stars, not as a slave dreams of escape, but as if the stars themselves whispered his name, calling him to rise. His mother Shmi carried her own chains. Quietly, she saw the storm inside her son and feared it as much as she loved it. A mother's fear is not for herself. It is for the day she can no longer protect what she has given to the galaxy. Off-worlders came, not traders, not masters, strangers carrying the light of the Jedi. The one called Qui-Gon looked at the boy and did not see a slave. He saw a destiny. The Force surged. I felt it even from the dark places beyond the veil. This was the moment the weave began to tighten. But destiny is never a gift. It is a debt. They spoke of a prophecy, a chosen one who would bring balance. Balance, the most dangerous word in the galaxy. For balance is not peace. It is the stillness, after all, is broken. The boy raced for his freedom. Engines screamed through. The canyon, metal wings kissed the wind. Every second in the Padres was a heartbeat in the chest of fate. He won. Of course, he won. The Force had already decided, but every victory demands its price. His freedom was purchased in exchange for separation, the mother left behind, the child taken by robed strangers. The first cut, a wound opened in him that day. It did not bleed where others could see. It bled in silence, dripping into the deep places of his soul. Fear took root there, fear of loss, fear that love is always followed by absence. The Jedi saw power. They did not see the wound. I whisper this to you now because I have seen it before. It is the way of the Force to speak in riddles, to give visions without maps. The Jedi believe themselves guardians, yet they are gardeners who plant seeds. Without knowing what will grow, Anakin was a seed planted in light. But shadow had already claimed the soil. He stood beneath the towering spires of Coruscant, the city of endless sky. He looked up, and the stars were gone. Only towers, only lights. The galaxy he had dreamed of was here, but it was not the galaxy. He imagined. The Jedi Temple welcomed him with ceremony. But the Force did not celebrate. It held its breath. Qui-Gon would not live to guide him. That thread was cut swiftly, cruelly. The boy was given to Obi-Wan, a brother in the Force, a teacher born of duty, not choice. Chains of metal can be broken. Chains of destiny cannot. Anakin's steps within the temple were the first notes of a song that had been written long before his birth. The prophecy was recited. The words were old, the meaning older still. He shall bring balance to the Force. But I tell you this, prophecy does not see the cost. It names only the end, not the ruin along the way. In the deep chambers of the temple, the boy slept in his new bed. Yet in dreams he walked the dunes again. He heard his mother's voice carried on the wind. He reached for her, but she was always beyond the next dune, always just out of sight. The fear grew, unseen, unheard, waiting. This was the beginning. Not the birth of a hero, not the rise of a savior. The beginning of a fracture in the Force itself, and from the shadowed corners of history, I watched. I whispered, I waited, because the child beneath twin suns was already walking toward the darkness to the prophecy of the Chosen One. The halls of the Jedi Temple were carved from silence. The walls held centuries of whispers, and the Force hummed through them like a deep, unseen current. Here Anakin walked, small among the great. The Jedi believed they had brought him into light. They did not know the shadow had followed him. The prophecy was older than the Republic. No one knew who first spoke it. The words had shifted over the centuries, retold by voices certain they understood its meaning. The Chosen One will bring balance to the Force. Some said balance meant the end of the Sith. Others said it meant the end of the Jedi. The Force itself gave no answer. To the Council, Anakin was a tool of destiny. To Anakin, the prophecy was a chain he could not see but always felt. It pulled at him, shaped the way others looked at him, the way they spoke to him. It made him a symbol before he could be a man. Obi-Wan trained him with discipline. Yet their bond was not the bond of a father and son, nor the bond of equals. It was duty binding them together, and duty is a brittle thing. It does not bend. It breaks. Anakin excelled in skill, but his heart was restless. The Temple's lessons spoke of serenity, detachment, letting go. He heard the words, but did not believe them. How could letting go be strength, when holding on had saved him in the Podrus, when holding on had kept him alive as a slave? To him, love and attachment were not weaknesses. They were life itself. In the meditation halls, he sat among the others, his eyes closed, his mind far away. The Force moved in him like a raging river, too strong to be stilled. Masters watched, and whispered that his power was dangerous. They were right. But power alone is not danger. The danger comes when power is driven by fear. The dreams began early. Flames, screams, the scent of burning flesh. A woman's voice crying out in the darkness. Always her voice. Always too far away to reach. He told no one. The Jedi would say, dreams were only visions, and visions were to be released, not held. But Anakin clung to them, believing they were warnings. The Council tested him. They looked for signs of darkness, signs of instability. They found them, though they named them differently. They called them impatience, defiance, overconfidence. They did not see the wound at the center of him, the wound made the day he left his mother behind. That wound was not closing. It was widening. The prophecy was recited again in council chambers, as if speaking the words aloud would make them clearer. But prophecy is never a map. It is a shadow on the wall. You may follow it, but you will not see the trap until it has closed. Some masters feared him. Some revered him. All misunderstood him. In their minds, balance meant an end they desired. None considered the balance might come through destruction. The Force does not choose sides. It only seeks equilibrium. And when one side grows too strong, the other rises to meet it. Anakin began to sense the weight of expectation. Every victory was measured against the prophecy. Every failure was a warning that perhaps he was not the one. Such burdens shaped men into warriors or monsters. The Temple taught that the future was always in motion, yet the way they looked at him said otherwise. In their eyes, his path was fixed. If he succeeded, they would claim they had trained the Chosen One. If he fell, they would claim they had always feared it. In either case, he was a story they could tell, not a person they could understand. The holocron remembers the day the boy stood in the archives, staring up at the oldest star maps. His eyes moved from system to system, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He wondered if his mother could see the same stars from Tatooine. He wondered if destiny cared for her life at all, or only for his. The Force whispered nothing in reply. Qui-Gon's absence left a hollow place in his training. The man who had believed in him without condition was gone, and in his place were rules, counsels, and judgment. Obi-Wan did his best, but his best was shaped by the Jedi Code, and the Code had no mercy for longing. Still, Anakin grew in power. His mastery of the lightsaber was unmatched among his peers. His command of the Force was raw and fierce. Masters began to fear not just what he was, but what he might become if the prophecy's meaning was not what they hoped. In the deep hours of the night, Anakin would stand on the temple's high balconies, feeling the wind on his face. Below him, Coruscant pulsed with life, unending and indifferent. Above him, the stars burned cold. Somewhere in that vastness lay the truth of the prophecy, but it remained hidden, patient, waiting for the right wound to open. The Force does not hurry. It weaves slowly, drawing threads together until there is no escape. The boy did not yet know that every choice he made, every bond he formed, was being counted, and when the sum was complete, the balance would be taken by light, by darkness, or by both. The prophecy was not salvation. It was a sentence, and it had already begun to be carried out. 3. The seeds of attachment. The Jedi taught that the way to strength was to release all bonds. They spoke of detachment as if it were light itself. But for Anakin, bonds were the only thing that had ever kept him alive. His friendship with Obi-Wan grew in the fires of training and war, yet it was never simple. Obi-Wan was mentor, rival, and brother all at once. He guided Anakin with patience, but also with frustration. Their words often clashed, but their blades moved in perfect unison. In the spaces between missions, another bond formed in secret. Padmé Amidala, the queen he had met as a boy, now a woman of strength and grace. At first, it was only glances, only conversations heavy with unspoken things. But in Anakin's heart, it was a fire. The Jedi Code called this fire dangerous. Anakin did not care. To him, it was life itself. He had been born in the cold shadow of slavery. Warmth was worth any price. The holocron remembers the way he looked at her, the way his voice changed when he spoke her name. It remembers how she smiled in return, unaware of the shadow her presence would cast on his future. Love, when untouched by fear, can be pure, but fear was already in him. The wound of leaving his mother, the dream visions of her suffering, they made his love for Padmé something else. Not just affection, possession. The Jedi could not see it. They saw his victories, his skill in battle, his loyalty to the Order. But in the quiet, his mind was with her. Every separation was an ache. Every danger she faced carved deeper into his resolve never to lose her. The war only fed this fire. As the Clone Wars spread across the galaxy, Anakin and Padmé's meetings became rarer, more desperate. Each one was a promise that the next would come, but each goodbye felt closer to final. The holocron speaks slowly now, as if weighing each word. Fear is the root from which the dark side blooms. It does not always come as hatred. Sometimes it comes as love twisted into something sharp. Anakin began to break the code in small ways. A touch too long, words spoken in secrecy, nights spent together when duty called him elsewhere. Each step was one more thread binding his soul to hers. When she smiled, he felt invincible. When she was in danger, he felt the galaxy narrow too. A single point, and when he imagined life without her, the point became a blade. The Jedi believed their rules could shape destiny, but destiny had no interest in their rules. The Force does not forbid attachment, it simply measures its weight, and when the weight grows too heavy, it drags all else down with it. Anakin. Loyalty to Obi-Wan and the Order was real, but it was no longer first in his heart. Padme had claimed that place without asking for it. She did not know she had become the axis on which his fate would turn. The holocron whispers a truth the Jedi never spoke aloud. Attachment is not weakness because it breaks. It is weakness because you will break anything else to keep it. In the war councils, Anakin stood tall among generals. His voice carried authority, his strategies won worlds. But in private, his thoughts turned to her safety, her health, her presence. The visions returned. Sometimes it was his mother's voice. Sometimes it was Padme's. Always in pain, always beyond reach. He told himself he would never fail again as he had failed his mother. This promise was not spoken to the Jedi, was spoken to himself in the silent hours, when fear pressed close like a shadow he could not push away. Every battle he fought became another reason to protect her. Every injury reminded him how fragile life could be. The war did not harden his heart, it sharpened it into a weapon aimed at anyone who might take her from him. The Jedi could sense the turbulence in him. Yoda spoke to him of letting go, of accepting loss before it comes. Anakin listened, but the words slid past like water over stone. The holocron tells me he believed he was strong enough to keep all. He loved safe, and that this belief was his armor. But armor can be shattered from within. Attachment is not born in a single moment. It grows quietly, like roots beneath the soil. By the time you see the tree, the roots have already claimed the ground. The seeds of Anakin's downfall had been planted long before the galaxy saw Darth Vader. They were planted in stolen moments, in whispered words, in the choice to value one life above the will of the Force. And the Force, ancient and unyielding, was patient. It would wait for the moment when the weight of those roots would pull him into shadow. For the war that fed the darkness, the Clone Wars, began like a storm on the edge of sight. First a rumble, then a flash, then the sky split open and the galaxy was drowned in fire. Anakin rose quickly in its chaos. His skill with a blade, his mastery of the Force, and his defiance of tradition made him a commander soldiers would follow without question. He led from the front, always in the thick of battle, always where the danger was greatest. To his men, this was courage. To the Jedi, it was recklessness. To Anakin, it was necessity. Every victory came at a cost. He buried the dead in memory, carrying each loss as a personal wound. The war fed his need to protect, and with every battle, that need grew sharper. The holocron speaks of shadows behind the war, a puppet master cloaked in robes of state, moving armies like pieces on a game board. Anakin fought for the Republic, but the Republic was already in chains. Palpatine watched him closely. The Chancellor's praise was warm where the Jedi's was measured. His words were soft where the councils were cold. Anakin began to feel more seen in the Chancellor's chambers than in the temple halls. War blurred the lines between the Jedi's teachings and survival's demands. Orders given in the council chamber were forgotten in the smoke of battle. Anakin learned to make decisions without their approval, and those decisions won wars. With each victory, his legend grew. The hero with no fear, they called him. But fear was in him. It had always been in him. He simply buried it beneath action, burying it so deep even he began to believe it wasn't there. Padme's face haunted his quiet moments. The war kept them apart for months at a time. When they met again, it was in stolen hours, shadows behind closed doors. These reunions were brief, and each one made leaving harder. The holocron remembers battles on worlds of ash, ice, and jungle. Droids falling in heaps, cities turned to rubble, skies filled with burning ships. In every fight, Anakin's choices tilted toward decisive, brutal ends. The Jedi Code spoke of defense, of ending conflict without cruelty. But war is not patient. Mercy is often just another word for delay, and delay means more dead. Anakin chose victory over restraint, and the war rewarded him for it. The Chancellor spoke often of trust between them. He asked questions no Jedi Master dared. He hinted at truths about the Force the Council would not share. He planted small seeds of doubt, telling Anakin the Jedi did not understand the galaxies. True nature. The holocron whispers that doubt is a quiet poison. It does not strike quickly. It seeps in, reshaping thought, turning questions into convictions. Anakin began to see the Council differently. Their rules seemed less like wisdom and more like chains. Their secrecy felt like betrayal. The Chancellor, in contrast, offered understanding, and when understanding is offered to the lonely, it feels like loyalty. The war's toll on Anakin was not only in lives lost. Each battle demanded that he act without hesitation, without pause for the Jedi's long deliberations. He began to trust his instincts over their orders. Those instincts were strong, but they were also driven by fear for Padme, fear of failure, fear of losing control. Victory fed his confidence, but also his isolation. Few could match his skill, fewer still could match his will. When others hesitated, he acted. When others debated, he struck. The holocron speaks of the battle over Coruscant, where the war's true master made his presence known. Dooku fell, his life ended at Anakin's blade. The Jedi called it necessary, Anakin called it justice. But in the Force, the act echoed darker than either would admit. Killing a Sith Lord should have brought him closer to the prophecy's fulfillment. Instead, it pulled him closer to the one who had orchestrated both sides of the war. Palpatine's praise after that battle was not the praise of a leader to a soldier. It was the approval of a master to an apprentice. Anakin did not yet see it, but the web was closing around him. The war had made him powerful. It had also made him used to power. The more he acted without the Council's permission, the more natural it felt. The more he relied on his own will, the less he needed theirs. The holocron warns that war is the dark side's favored tool. It creates the illusion of necessity, where cruelty is called survival and ambition is called leadership. It turns victories into stepping stones toward a cliff you cannot see until you've stepped too far. By the war's final days, Anakin was no longer just the boy beneath the twin suns. He was the Republic's sharpest blade, honed in fire, dangerous in the wrong hands. And the wrong hands were already reaching for him. 5. The whisper of immortality. War was nearing its final breath when the seed was planted. A seed of power, a seed of fear. It came not from the battlefield, but from the Chancellor's quiet words. Palpatine did not speak of politics that night. He spoke of death, and of how it could be denied. Anakin listened because the subject was a wound he could not bear to touch. He had dreamt of Padme's death. The dreams were like the ones he had of his mother, and those had been true. Palpatine's voice was calm, low, patient. He spoke of an ancient Sith Lord who had mastered the art of bending life and death to his will, Darth Plagueis, a name that carried the scent of forbidden archives. The holocron tells us that death is the oldest currency in the galaxy. The promise to undo it is the purest bait. To those who have known loss, it is irresistible. Anakin asked questions. Palpatine gave only fragments. Never the full truth, only the suggestion that such power was possible, and that the Jedi would never share it with him. The Chancellor leaned close and said the words that would haunt the boy forever. Only through me will you learn this. The holocron describes fear as a living thing. It grows in the dark, feeding on whispers. The more Anakin thought of Padme's death, the sharper the fear became. It began to carve hollows in his heart, places where light could not reach. The Jedi Code told him to accept death, to let go. But the Code had not saved his mother. The Code would not save Padme. And if the Code would not save her, then the Code could burn. Palpatine spoke of the dark side not as evil, but as a fuller truth. A tool, a path to knowledge, the Jedi feared. A path that might lead to salvation for the one Anakin loved most. The holocron hums when it speaks of this moment. The shift in Anakin's heart was not a strike of lightning. It was the slow closing of a door, shutting out the old light while the new darkness seeped in. Anakin began to watch Palpatine, not just as a leader, but as a keeper of the answers he sought. He found himself weighing the Chancellor's counsel against the Council's, and the Council was losing. Dreams of Padme's death became more frequent. He saw her pale, gasping, her hand reaching for him, and his own hands unable to hold her. These visions woke him in sweat and silence. Each morning after such dreams, Palpatine's promise burned hotter in his mind. It no longer felt like an option. It felt like the only path. The holocron warns that once a heart believes something is the only way, it has already stepped off the cliff. In the Jedi Temple, Anakin felt the distance grow. Masters who once praised his courage now questioned his judgment. Their calm felt like indifference. Their patience felt like neglect. In the Chancellor's chambers, there was no such coldness. Palpatine listened. Palpatine understood. Palpatine made no judgment when Anakin spoke of fear. Instead, he fed it carefully, like a gardener tending a rare flower. The holocron whispers that Sith manipulation is not always forceful. It can be gentle, slow, disguised as care. The prey walks willingly into the snare because it believes the snare is shelter. Anakin began to imagine what he might do with such power, how quickly he could save Padme, end the war, protect the galaxy from ever knowing such loss again. He saw himself not as betraying the Jedi, but as perfecting them. Palpatine never rushed him. That was his mastery. The promise of immortality did not have to be delivered now. It only had to remain within reach, always shining just beyond the grasp of Jedi rules. The holocron calls this the venom of hope. Hope twisted into obsession. Hope sharpened into a weapon against the self. By the time the war's final campaigns began, Anakin was no longer fighting only to win battles. He was fighting to preserve the world in which Padme still breathed. Every threat to the Republic was a threat to her. Every delay in ending the war was a delay in securing her life. The Chancellor's enemies became his enemies, and the Council's suspicions became, in his eyes, proof of their blindness. The holocron marks this as the turning point. Not the duels, not the slaughter, not even the fire of Mustafar. Here, in these quiet whispers, the fall began. The galaxy saw a hero leading its armies. The Force saw a soul beginning to sell itself, piece by piece. And in the silent chambers of the Chancellor's office, the seed of immortality took root, waiting for the day it would bloom in blood. Chapter 6. The betrayal of light. The holocron hums softly, a slow pulse of gold and red, as though remembering wounds it would rather forget. Its voice emerges like an echo through centuries, at once calm and heavy with sorrow. This was the day the blade turned in his hands. It was not the clash of armies or the roar of starfighters that ended the Jedi's trust in Anakin Skywalker. It was silence, the kind that creeps into a room full of masters and strangles the air until every word tastes of suspicion. The council chamber sat high above the clouds of Coruscant, its floor polished to a perfect mirror. Light streamed in through the wide windows, but to Anakin it felt cold, as though even the sun had chosen to keep its distance. The ring of 12 chairs was occupied, the most powerful Jedi in the Order arrayed in judgment. Mace Windu's gaze was unflinching, a steel wall behind calm eyes. Yoda leaned forward slightly, the tips of his clawed fingers resting together, unreadable but watchful. Obi-Wan was there too, his expression carefully measured, betraying neither agreement nor protest, and that neutrality cut deeper than outright accusation. "You will report to us," Windu said at last, each syllable placed like a stone. "The Chancellor has grown, too attached to you, Skywalker. We need you to observe him and report anything unusual." Anakin blinked. The words didn't fit in his mind. The council, his council, was asking him to spy on the man who had been his mentor, his guide, his friend since boyhood. "You want me," he said slowly, "to act against the Supreme Chancellor." "Act for the Republic," Windu corrected. "But—" Anakin heard what was unsaid. "We do not trust you. We trust the mission, but not the man." The holocron's voice deepens. From that moment, the warmth of the temple's halls turned to frost. Anakin Skywalker, the hero of the Clone Wars, felt the first true fracture between himself and the Order. It was not the will of the Force he heard in that chamber, but the rustle of suspicion. Anakin bowed stiffly, the motion more duty than respect. The council dismissed him, but their eyes followed him as he left all but Obi-Wan's, which lowered to the floor as though unable to meet his gaze. The corridors outside seemed longer than he remembered. His boots rang against the marble in lonely rhythm, and every passing Jedi seemed to look through him rather than at him. The temple's great spires, once symbols of hope, loomed like prison bars. He went where he always went when his chest felt too tight to breathe. The Chancellor's private office. Palpatine received him not as a ruler, but as a friend. The light in the chamber was warm, golden, spilling across silken drapes and carved furniture. The Chancellor rose from behind his desk and approached as though welcoming home a long-lost son. "My boy," Palpatine said, his tone rich with sympathy, "you seem troubled." Anakin hesitated, then let the truth slip. "The Council, they want me to spy on you?" The Chancellor's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of disappointment crossing his face. Not at Anakin, but at the Council. How predictable. They've never truly trusted you, have they? "They trust me with my life," Anakin said, though the words felt brittle. "No," Palpatine murmured. "They trust your skill, but not your heart. And why should they? You are more powerful than they are, more attuned to the Force than any of them. That frightens them." The holocron hums again. This was the warmth offered by the serpent, the promise of understanding where none could be found. To a heart that has been starved of trust, even poison tastes sweet. Palpatine turned away, gazing out at the endless city beyond the window. They fear losing control of you, Anakin, and so they will chain you under the guise of duty. But I see you for what you are. And what am I? The future. The one who can bring order to a galaxy drowning in war. The Jedi are relics of a bygone age, well-meaning perhaps, but blind. I can teach you to see. Something in Anakin tightened, a knot of longing and resentment all wound together. In the council chamber, he had felt small, diminished. Here, in this golden light, he felt necessary, chosen. Palpatine's voice softened. I know the secrets of the Force the Jedi would never dare teach you. Powers they fear, powers that could save the one you love. Anakin's breath caught. Save. Palpatine turned to him fully now, his smile gentle, almost fatherly. You dream of her death, do you not? Anakin stiffened. He had told no. One of the visions. I can help you, Palpatine said, resting a hand on his shoulder, but only if you trust me completely. The holocron's voice drops to a whisper, and so the scales tipped. The boy who once swore to serve the light found a warmer sun in shadow. His trust, once unshakable, now leaned toward the man who would unmake him. It was a choice that felt small in the moment, a single step, but the shadowed path begins with only one. Anakin left the Chancellor's office with a strange calm in his chest, as though a weight had shifted. He told himself it was clarity. In truth, it was surrender. The day had begun with the Council's doubt, and it ended with a whisper that would echo through the rest of his life. They will never understand you, but I will. And so the blade turned in his hands, and the betrayal of light was complete, though Anakin did not yet know it. Chapter 7. The birth of Darth Vader. The holocron dims, as though afraid of its own memory. The light within it flickers, between pale gold and deep crimson, and when it speaks, the tone is hushed, reverent, but edged with dread. This is the night Anakin Skywalker died. The galaxy remembers it as the birth of Darth Vader. Coruscant lay beneath the blanket of night, its endless towers lit by the flicker of speeders and the glow of distant skylanes. But within the Jedi temple, the light was unnatural, sharp, white, clinical, a beacon of wisdom, and soon a tomb. Anakin walked through the temple's great gates, his hood casting a deep shadow over his face. To any who saw him, he was the same heroic general who had led clone legions to victory across the stars. Yet something in his step was different, slower, heavier, but utterly certain. His blade hung at his side like a sleeping serpent. Outside, the city murmured with the usual hum of life. Inside, the silence was suffocating. He was not alone. Behind him marched a detachment of clone troopers in white armor, their boots striking in perfect rhythm, the hiss of the doors closing behind them was like the ceiling of a tomb. The first Jedi they encountered was a knight barely past apprenticeship. Anakin, what is the blue light of a saber, sprang to life in his hands, but it was too late. A single crimson stroke cut him down. The temple became a place of echoes, the hum of sabers, the shouts of children, the bark of trooper rifles, but above all, it became a place of endings. They swept through the halls like a storm. In the archives, the glow of ancient datapads lit the faces of scholars who never drew their weapons. In the training rooms, Padawans scrambled for cover, their instructors shouting orders. drowned by blaster fire. Then came the younglings. Anakin entered the Grand Council chamber where they had gathered, huddled behind the chairs of the absent masters. A boy stepped forward, no older than 10, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. What are we going to do?" Anakin's lips pressed into a thin line. His hand reached for his saber. The hiss of ignition was the only answer. The holocron's voice falters for a moment, as if to catch its breath. In this moment, the Force itself shuddered. The death of innocence has a weight that bends time. Even now, their final fear lingers in the stones of that place. Outside, smoke rose from the temple's upper levels, lit by the orange flare of fire. The night sky of Coruscant was split by the deep roar of Republic gunships, though they no longer served the Republic as it had been. Palpatine's voice, amplified across the holonet, declared the Jedi traitors and called for their extermination in the council chamber of the Senate. The Chancellor stood cloaked in shadows. "The time has come," he told the galaxy, to end the Jedi Order. The holocron speaks lower now, more intimate. The transformation of Anakin Skywalker was not a single blow, but a chain of moments, each one cutting away what he had been. By the time the temple burned, only the shell remained. Somewhere in the chaos, Anakin paused to look out over the city. His chest rose and fell with the rhythm of his breath, steady and calm despite the slaughter. The glow of flames reflected in his eyes, but there was no hesitation, no regret, only purpose. When the night's work was done, the temple lay silent. The air was thick with the smell of scorched stone and burned cloth. Bodies young and old lay where they had fallen. The archives were shattered. Knowledge scattered like ashes in the wind. Anakin descended the great steps of the temple into the cool night air. His cloak billowed behind him, and the clones stood aside as he passed. Somewhere far above, thunder rolled, though no storm clouds marred the sky. Palpatine awaited him in the Senate rotunda, his face twisted in a triumphant smile. "You have done well, my apprentice," he said, the title dripping with satisfaction. "Henceforth, you shall be known as Darth Vader." The name struck like a hammer against the hollow that had once been Anakin's soul. It was not chosen, but bestowed a crown of thorns placed upon his head. In that naming, the holocron whispers, the galaxy gained a new shadow. The boy was gone. In his place stood a man forged in fire and betrayal. And though his armor had yet to be forged, the mask was already there, unseen but absolute. The night sky of Coruscant still glittered, indifferent to the horror below. But somewhere, in the deepest threads of the Force, the death of Anakin Skywalker rang out like a bell. The dark side swelled to fill the void. The birth of Darth Vader was not a beginning, but the final step of an ending that had been written in silence. Doubt and a single choice. Chapter 8. The fire of Mustafa's holocron's glow turns the color of molten rock, pulsing slowly as if in memory of the heat. Its voice carries a weight unlike before, not sorrow alone, but the inevitability of prophecy fulfilled. Here the bonds of brotherhood were burned away. Here the chosen one lay broken upon the black shore. Mustafar was a planet that breathed fire. The air itself shimmered with heat, and the ground trembled under the restless movement of molten rivers. From the moment the separatist leaders saw Anakin's silhouette in the doorway, the room became a slaughterhouse. The red glow of his saber danced through the haze, and the walls echoed with screams. When it was done, the great mining facility fell into a terrible silence, broken only by the deep rumble of the planet's molten heart. Anakin stood alone, among the bodies, breathing hard, sweat streaking the soot on his face. In the distance, streams of lava lit the sky in blood-orange arcs, but the Force stirred, a familiar presence, a shadow from his past. The ramp of a sleek starship descended, and out stepped Obi-Wan Kenobi. His robes were dusted with ash from the landing, his hair wind-tossed, his eyes fixed with the unshakable focus of a man walking toward destiny. "Anakin," Obi-Wan called, his voice barely carrying over the rumble of the planet. "What have you done?" Anakin turned slowly, his eyes hard, his expression set. "I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire, your new empire." Obi-Wan's voice rose in disbelief. "Don't make me kill you, Anakin." Warned, though the warning felt like an invitation. The duel was inevitable. It was the last conversation between two men who had once been brothers, now speaking only in the language of blades. Their lightsabers clashed with a sound like tearing steel. The battle moved from the landing platform into the refinery's vast halls, sparks flying where plasma met metal. Every blow was heavy with history. Training on Coruscant's terraces, laughter in the mess hall during the war, the bond of trust that had survived 1,000 battlefields. On Mustafar, all of it was ash. They fought up narrow catwalks above chasms of lava, the heat blistering against their skin, each swing of the saber illuminating their faces in alternating blue and red. Obi-Wan's style was precise, controlled, the defense of a man trying to end a fight without killing. Anakin's strikes were fierce, relentless, driven by raw emotion. "You turned her against me," Anakin shouted, voice cracking with rage. "You have done that yourself," Obi-Wan replied, his breath sharp, his stance unshaken. Outside, an explosion sent a tremor through the facility. Metal groaned, lava surged, and their footing became treacherous. The fight spilled onto a floating platform, drifting slowly toward a massive waterfall of molten rock. The world narrowed to the heat, the roar, and the flash of their blades. Then, an opening. Obi-Wan leaped onto the blackened slope above the river, gaining the high ground. He stood firm, saber ready. "It's over, Anakin," he said, chest heaving. "I have the high ground." Anakin's eyes burned with pride and fury. "You underestimate my power. Don't try it." But he did. The leap was fast, desperate, and doomed. Obi-Wan's blade cut through the air in a single, perfect motion. Anakin's scream tore across the lava as he fell, landing hard on the black shore below, his legs severed. The stench of burning flesh filled the air as the heat crawled toward him. The holocron's voice grows quieter. Even then, he tried to climb. His fingers dug into the ash, his eyes wild with hate. But hate cannot lift a man from the pit he has chosen. Obi-Wan stood above, his face twisted in grief. "You were the chosen one. It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them. Bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness." I hate you," Anakin roared, the words more than rage. They were the last chords snapping between them. Obi-Wan's voice broke. "You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you." He turned away, unable to watch as the lava surged closer. The sound of Anakin's screams followed him up the slope until the roar of the river drowned them. When the Emperor's shuttle arrived, the blackened, broken figure on the shore was no longer the man Obi-Wan had known. Armor would hide the ruin. A mask would silence the screams. But the man was already gone. The holocron falls silent for a beat, as if scorched by its own memory. Chapter 9. The Black Mask. The holocron's light dims to a cold, steady red. The warmth of Mustafa's fire is gone now, replaced by the metallic chill of a tomb. When the voice returns, it is slow and deliberate, as though each word must be weighed before it is spoken. The man who rose from Mustafa's black shore was no longer Anakin Skywalker, but the galaxy did not yet know his new name. That would come with the mask. They carried him through the halls of the Emperor's private medical center on Coruscant, a place few had seen and none had left without being changed. His body was ruined, skin charred, limbs severed, lungs burned by the superheated air of the lava banks. Yet the Emperor's stride was calm, as though he were delivering a prize rather than a dying man. The droids swarmed over him in a blur of cold efficiency. Scalpels hummed, servos whirred, and bright surgical lights pierced the shadows. They cut away what was left of him, replacing limbs with durasteel and synth muscle, wiring nerves into circuits. There was no anesthesia, only the Emperor's will holding him in the embrace of the living. His breath came in ragged gasps, each one a battle. Somewhere deep inside the wreckage of his body, the man still tried to speak, to call out for pardon. The Emperor watched in silence, offering no comfort, only the knowledge that survival was not a mercy but a command. The body was remade, in iron and shadow, but the true prison was not the steel. It was the breathing. The droids fitted a device over his mouth and nose, a mask that locked into place with a hiss, sealing away his face forever. It connected to a black dome of armor that encased his skull, hiding whatever humanity remained. When the final piece was set, the sound began, the slow, mechanical draw and release of air. A metronome of death, steady and inescapable. He rose from the table, not by choice, but because the Emperor willed it. Black armor gleamed under the surgical lights, a dark reflection of the Jedi robes he had once worn. Each movement was heavier now, every step accompanied by the faint hiss of hydraulics. "Lord Vader," the Emperor said, his voice curling like smoke in the air, "can you hear me?" The reply was not the voice of Anakin Skywalker. It was deeper, colder, a low resonance filtered through the mask. "Yes, my master." "Then rise, your destiny awaits." Vader stood, towering in his new form. The weight of the armor seemed to pull him toward the floor, yet he remained upright, as if the dark side itself was holding him there. The holocron's tone drops lower, almost conspiratorial. In that moment, the galaxy shifted. The Republic, already shattered, bent to the will of the Empire. The Jedi, scattered and hunted, became ghosts. And through it all walked this figure of iron, the shadow of the man who had been chosen to save them. News of the Temple massacre spread through whispers and propaganda. The Holonet called it a necessary purge, the work of loyal forces against treachery. None outside the Emperor's circle knew that the towering figure in black had once been. The Jedi's brightest star, Beta, moved through the galaxy like a storm front, his presence heralded by silence. Doors closed, voices dropped, and the air itself seemed to grow heavier wherever he passed. The sound of his breathing was enough to unnerve even seasoned soldiers, a constant reminder that what stood before them was more machine than man, and yet more dangerous than either alone. The holocron lingers on one image, Vader standing on the bridge of an Imperial Star Destroyer. The galaxy stretched out before him in starlit silence. His cape hung motionless in the still air, his hands clasped behind his back. There was no joy in conquest, only purpose. Yet within the armor, the embers of Anakin still burned. buried deep beneath layers of hate and obedience, a name still whispered in the dark. But no one heard it, not even him. For the galaxy, the name Anakin Skywalker was gone, forgotten by most, erased from history by design. Only Darth Vader remained, a figure whose legend would grow with every system conquered, every Jedi slain. The holocron's voice becomes almost mournful now. The mask was not merely to hide his ruin, it was to make him eternal. Flesh decays, but iron endures. And so the Emperor ensured that his apprentice would be remembered, not as a man, but as the shadow that swallowed the stars. And in that shadow, the chosen one was gone. For now, Chapter 10, the years of iron chains, the holocron glows. Faintly now, its light dulled, as if the years it remembers are too heavy to shine through. The voice that emerges is measured and distant, like the telling of a story whose ending has been known for far too long. The years that followed were not years of life, but years of service. Service not to the galaxy, nor to the Force, but to a throne built on fear. Darth Vader moved across the stars as the Emperor's blade, and wherever that blade fell, worlds broke. The galaxy, once a tapestry of independent systems, was now bound in the black iron of the Empire. Planet by planet, the imperial crest rose. Over government halls, its shadow stretching across oceans, deserts, forests, and cityscap. In the early years, resistance was loud, desperate, and brief. Rebel fleets were hunted, their leaders executed in public squares. Jedi who had survived the Purge hid in the forgotten corners of the galaxy, but Vader found them. The Emperor did not need the Jedi destroyed for victory. He needed them destroyed. For permanence, Vader's hunts became legend among the few who knew the truth. A hooded figure stepping from the dark, a lightsaber igniting with a crimson hiss, and the sound always the sound of that mechanical breath. Some fought, some fled, all fell. The holocron lingers on one such hunt, a moon covered in rust-red plains, the air sharp with the scent of metal. A former Jedi Master waited there, his saber at the ready, the wind tugging at his tattered robes. When Vader came, there was no conversation. The fight was brutal, brief, and final. When it was over, Vader stood alone, the setting sun glinting. Off his armor, the name of the Jedi already forgotten. In time, the galaxy stopped asking where the Jedi had gone. The children born after the Purge grew up never having seen one, knowing only the Empire's version that they were traitors, dangerous mystics who had tried to tear the Republic apart. The Emperor ruled from his spire on Coruscant, his decrees, carried out without question. Vader was the instrument of those decrees. His word feared as much as the Emperors, admirals, governors, and Moffs all lowered their heads when the black figure appeared, for they knew the Emperor's displeasure. Often arrived wearing a mask, yet the holocron speaks not only of conquest, but of solitude. Though the galaxy bent to him, it did not belong to him. For all his power, Darth Vader was a servant, bound not by chains of metal, but by chains of the soul. When his missions ended, he returned to the sterile chambers of his personal quarters aboard the Executor, or within the Imperial Palace. There were no windows there, no warmth, only the hum of machinery that kept him alive and the faint, endless rhythm of his own breath. The Emperor rarely spoke to him of the past. When he did, it was to remind him that the past was weakness. There was no Anakin Skywalker, no Jedi, no friends, only power and the will to use it. And yet, in the silence between campaigns, the holocron whispers that memories still came, unbidden, unwanted. The laughter of a woman, the voice of a brother in arms, the smell of rain on the landing platforms of Camino, small, human things that the armor could not erase. Vader crushed those thoughts when they rose, as he had been taught. But the act of crushing them meant they had never truly died. The years blurred together. Empires do not rest, and neither did their enforcers. Slave worlds were expanded, fleets rebuilt, and the great imperial war machine ground on without pause. The galaxy learned to live in fear, and fear, once learned, is not easily unlearned. But fear is not loyalty. Whispers of rebellion began in the shadowed cantinas of Outer Rim worlds, carried by smugglers and defectors. Small sparks, quickly stamped. Out, yet sparks nonetheless. The holocron's voice lowers, as though leaning closer. It was in these years of iron chains that fate began to turn again, slowly, imperceptibly. The dark side had claimed the chosen one, but the Force is patient, and somewhere, far from the Emperor's reach, a seed had been planted. Vader did not yet know it. The Emperor did not yet fear it. But the galaxy was already moving toward the next storm. For now, Darth Vader served. Obedience without end, conquest without joy, power without peace. The man was gone. The mask endured, and the years passed like a winter with no spring. Chapter 11. The sun from the stars. The holocron's glow changes still, dark at the edges, but with a faint, almost imperceptible glimmer of gold in its center. The voice that emerges has a subtle tension now, as though the events it recalls are not yet cold history, but the first rumblings of a storm. The dark side ruled him. The Emperor commanded him. But the Force belongs to no one, and its tides will always return. It began as whispers, reports from Imperial intelligence of a rebel pilot whose skill in the cockpit defied explanation. He had destroyed the Death Star, the Empire's ultimate weapon, with a single, impossible shot. To most, he was a nameless insurgent, another target to be eliminated. To Darth Vader, he was familiar. The first time Vader saw the holorecordings from Yavin, he did not move. The flickering image of the young pilot, helmet obscuring his face, speaking with the excitement of victory, it stirred something buried deep. Not recognition, not yet, but a pull. Find him, Vader ordered, his voice a cold blade. Alive. The holocron's tone sharpens. The Emperor had told Vader nothing. In truth, the Emperor had not yet realized the truth himself, that the boy carried a name long thought extinguished. The search spanned months. Probes scoured star systems, bounty hunters were unleashed, informants squeezed for information, until their loyalty or their lives gave way. And then, a name. Luke Skywalker. It was not spoken to Vader as revelation, but as intelligence. Yet when the syllables reached his ears, they did not sound like information. They sounded like Destiny Skywalker. Vader stood in silence, the low hiss of his breathing the only sound in the chamber. Inside, something shifted, a fault line deep beneath the armor, sending tremors through the cold iron of his obedience. Luke Skywalker. The holocron's voice grows softer. The name was an ember in the ashes. He had thought the fire gone forever. But here it was, small yet bright, carried across the stars to him. The Emperor summoned him not long after. There is a great disturbance in the Force, Palpatine said, his voice curling like smoke in the air. We have a new enemy, the young rebel who destroyed the Death Star. I have no doubt this boy is the offspring of Anakin Skywalker. Vader did not react, not outwardly. How is that possible? Search your feelings, Lord Vader, the Emperor said with a smile that never reached his eyes. You will know it to be true. He could destroy us. Vader bowed his head, masking the currents of thought swirling beneath. He will join us or die, my master. The Emperor saw only a threat to be eliminated or bent to his will. Vader saw something else, not merely an enemy, but an heir, a chance to break the chains he had worn for so long. When Vader closed his eyes in the solitude of his meditation chamber, visions came, a young man standing before him, lightsaber in hand, defiant and unafraid. But in some visions, the boy stood beside him, not against him. The galaxy bowed before them both. For the first time in many years, Vader's thoughts strayed from the Emperor's commands toward his own designs. He imagined telling the boy the truth not as an admission of weakness, but as an invitation to power. We can overthrow him, father and son. The words formed in the mind long before they were spoken aloud. The holocron seems to hesitate now, as though weighing the meaning of what it remembers. Fate had moved again. In the quiet corridors of a star destroyer, in the endless black between stars, Darth Vader began to dream, not of the life he had lost, but of the empire he could still take. The hunt for Luke Skywalker became his personal mission. Officers felt the change. Orders were sharper, punishments swifter, the pressure relentless. Entire sectors were turned inside out in the search. And though Luke did not yet know it, the shadow that pursued him was not only that of the Empire, but of blood. Chapter 12. The Temptation of Blood. The holocron's light deepens, gold now, mixing with a dangerous crimson, as though the past itself is conflicted. The voice is slower, heavier, a predator circling its prey. When the dark side reaches for you, it does not always come as a blade. Sometimes it comes as a hand outstretched. In kinship and chains, Vader's pursuit of Luke was no longer the cold, impersonal hunt of the Empire. It became intimate. The boy was no longer a target. He was an opportunity. The Emperor, ever cautious, had commanded that Luke be destroyed if he could not be turned. But Vader did not intend to offer the boy to Sidious at all, not unless it served his own purpose. For the first time since Mustafar, Vader began to think not of serving, but of ruling. When their first clash came on the gantries of Bespin, the clouds raging beyond, it was not simply a duel. Vader's strikes were precise but measured, driving Luke back, testing him. The boy's anger flared like a match in the dark. "Have been trained well," Vader said, his voice heavy beneath the helmet. "But you are not a Jedi yet." Every move was designed not only to dominate, but to provoke, to make the boy feel the heat of his own rage, to awaken something that would bind him to the dark side. Luke fought with desperation, his style raw. But there was strength. Strength, Vader recognized. My strength. The holocron lingers here, its voice low and deliberate. The bond between them was not yet spoken, but it was felt, a thread in the Force, bright and taut, tying their fates. Together, when Vader drove him to the edge, wounded and cornered, he did not finish the kill. Instead, he spoke the words that would change everything. "Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father." Luke's breath came in ragged bursts. "He told me enough. He told me you killed him." "No." Vader's voice was softer now, almost gentle, a whisper wrapped in steel. "I am your father." The holocron's light flares, casting shadows like lightning across the chamber. In that moment, truth became the snare. The boy's identity, his defiance, all shattered under the weight of it. And into the cracks, Vader poured his vision. "Join me," Vader said, extending his gloved hand. "With our combined strength, we can end this destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy. Come with me, it is the only way." But the boy stepped back, and then he fell. Not to the dark side, not yet, but into the abyss. Choosing death over surrender, Vader stood at the edge, looking down into the void where his son had vanished, his outstretched hand closing slowly into a fist. The hunt was not over. Blood had called to blood and been refused. But destiny does not yield to a single choice. The dark side would call again. Chapter 13. The hand severed the holocrons. Light flickers, as if it too feels the strain of the moment it remembers. Gold becomes silver, then fades toward a cold, metallic blue, the color of exposed durasteel. The voice that follows is deliberate, savoring every beat, each word carrying the weight of prophecy. There are moments in history where the galaxy holds its breath, where the clash of two blades becomes more than battle, it becomes judgment. Father and son faced each other, sabers lit like opposing suns. One burned with the precision of a master long honed in war, the other fled, wild, fueled by defiance and a desperate need to protect. Yet beneath Luke Skywalker's determination, fear coiled, a living thing waiting to strike. The air in the throne room was alive with the hum of energy, each blow of their blades sending tremors through the Emperor's dark heart. He watched from his throne, silent, eyes glinting with the pleasure of a spider sensing the web quiver. Vader pressed forward, relentless, his strikes heavier, faster. He was no longer testing his son, he was driving him to the edge of the abyss. Luke's breaths grew ragged, his steps uneven, until a spark. Vader's words struck with more precision than any blade. "If you will not turn to the dark side, perhaps she will." Leah, Luke's eyes ignited with something new. Not just fear, but fury. His saber became a storm, raining down blow after blow. Vader staggered back, his defenses faltering under the ferocity. The holocron's voice deepens, almost mournful. And so the boy's path bent, not toward mercy, but toward wrath. In his heart, the same darkness that once claimed his father began to whisper. A final, brutal strike. Luke's blade carved through armor, through servos, through flesh and machine alike. Vader's severed hand clattered to the floor, sparks hissing from the stump. Luke froze. The blade in his hand still hummed, but the sound now seemed distant, alien. His eyes fell to the blackened stump, then to his own gloved hand, hiding, the mechanical replacement beneath. And in that reflection, the son saw the father, and the fate that awaited him. Above them, the Emperor's laughter rolled like thunder. This was the moment he had crafted, father and son bound by pain, bound by rage, ready to kneel. But Luke turned away from the abyss. Not yet. Chapter 14. The Emperor's smile, the holocron dims, shadows curling along its surface like smoke. The voice that emerges is low, almost amused, as if it understands the seduction in what it is about to tell. In every war, there is a moment when the victor need not swing a blade, for the enemy will deliver themselves into his hands. Luke's saber still burned in his grasp, the tip trembling inches from Darth Vader's chest. His breath was heavy, his heart pounding like war drums in the silence that followed, from the shadows of his throne. Emperor Palpatine leaned forward, his grin carved into his face like a scar upon the galaxy itself. His voice was honey-laced with venom. Yes, good. Your hate has made you powerful. The holocron's tone sharpens. For the dark side is not offered in chains, but in choice. It whispers not of servitude, but of freedom. The freedom to strike without doubt, to take without permission. Luke's fingers twitched on the hilt. The Emperor's words wrapped around his mind like silk. Vader had been reduced to a broken figure at his feet. The monster unmasked, the tyrant brought low. All that remained was to strike and descend. The Emperor rose, robes flowing like a black tide. He stepped close, his eyes alive with the sickly yellow fire of the dark side. Now, fulfill your destiny. Take your father's place at my side. The throne room seemed to shrink around Luke, the air thick with the stench of ozone and old death. Beyond the walls, fleets clashed and soldiers died. But here, in this chamber, the galaxy's fate balanced on the boy's decision. The holocron's voice slows, weighted with awe. And for the first time, the son stood where the father once stood. The same offer, the same power, the same abyss yawning before his feet. Luke's gaze drifted to his own hand, the false flesh hiding cold metal beneath. Then to Vader's stump, smoking and sparking. And for a moment, he saw himself years ahead, helmeted, armored, and hollow. He deactivated his saber. Never, I'll never turn to the dark side. Palpatine's smile did not falter. It simply changed, from welcome to mockery. Then you will die. Chapter 15. The Last Redemption. The holocron hums low, its light flickering like a dying flame. The voice that speaks now is no longer amused, but reverent, as though what it recalls is too sacred to tell quickly. There comes a moment in every life where choice is stripped bare of words, of logic, of fear. Only the truth remains, and it demands an answer. The Emperor's fingers curled into claws. Blue lightning erupted from them, lancing across the throne room. The air stank of scorched metal and burning flesh. Luke crumpled beneath the onslaught, his body writhing, his screams swallowed by the crackling storm. Palpatine's cackle echoed against the walls like the laughter of something older than the Republic itself. Vader watched, the bolts reflected in his lenses, each strike painting the memory of another, a council chamber, a burning temple, a boy screaming beneath his blade. For years, the dark side had told him this was justice, this was strength. But there, in the Emperor's shadow, he saw the truth. It was only hunger. The dark side consumes, but it cannot love. It devours, but it cannot protect. Luke's voice, hoarse, clawed through the noise. Father, please. The holocron's tone deepens, almost a whisper. It was not the plea that moved him. It was the name, Anakin Skywalker, buried beneath years of rage, betrayal, and servitude, stirred. The boy he once was rose within the man he had become. Without thought, without plan, only instinct. He moved. Vader turned. His massive hands closed around the Emperor's withered form. Lightning spilled wildly, searing them both, filling the chamber with a blinding storm. Palpatine shrieked, not in fear, but in fury, as the apprentice he had forged became his executioner. With a final, shuddering roar, Vader hurled him into the abyss. The lightning vanished. Silence fell. Smoke curled from Vader's armor. Each breath came ragged, shallow. But beneath the mask, the dark side's grip had loosened. The chains were broken. And for the first time in a lifetime, Anakin Skywalker stood free. Chapter 16. The death of the Chosen One. The holocron's glow dims to a deep ember red. Its voice slows, as if each word must be carried with care, lest the weight of the memory shatter it. All victories demand a price, and some prices are paid in the coin of breath and heartbeat. Vader collapsed to one knee, his frame trembling. Beneath its own weight, sparks danced from ruined circuits. The chest plate, once the machine's steady heartbeat, stuttered, faltered. Luke knelt beside him, the young man's face pale with a dawning horror. He reached for the mask. No, the rasp came, mechanical and frail at once. You'll die. It is a strange thing to fear being seen, and yet crave it. Anakin's gauntleted hand lifted, urging him on. Let me look on you with my own eyes. The locks hissed. The mask came away with a slow, reluctant sigh. The face beneath was pale, scarred, and human eyes ringed in age and pain, yet alight with something the galaxy had not seen in decades. It was not Vader who looked upon the boy, but the father who had once cradled him in dreams. Luke's voice broke. I have to save you. You already have, Anakin whispered. The air around them felt still, as though the Force itself paused to listen. He drew one last breath, not through the cold lung of his prison, but as a man. Tell your sister you were right. His eyes closed. The chest plate's rhythm ceased. And so the Chosen One fulfilled the prophecy, not by slaying the Sith in triumph, but by slaying the Sith within himself. Luke remained there for a long moment, holding the man who had once been a shadow, now made light again, if only for a heartbeat. Chapter 17. The Ashes of Empire. The holocron's light flickers again. Not with sorrow, but with the weary glow of a long-forgotten dawn. Empires do not fall in silence. They shatter, and their fragments cut long after the banners burn. Above Endor, the second Death Star tore itself apart. A bloom of fire consumed its heart, sending molten debris tumbling into the void. The roar of the explosion could not be heard in space, but in the Force it rang like a great bell. Across the galaxy, the news spread in whispers that swelled into shouts. Star destroyers lost their will to fight. Governors abandoned their palaces. Some worlds erupted in celebration. Others descended into chaos. The Emperor was dead. His shadow had lifted, and yet the air felt no lighter. The dark side does not vanish when its master falls. It scatters 1,000 blades hidden in the dust. On Coruscant, statues of Palpatine were pulled down by cheering crowds, their faces lit by torchlight. But in the alleys beyond the celebrations, Imperial loyalists regrouped, their eyes full of quiet vengeance. Luke stood apart from it all, the pious firelight flickering across his face as Vader's armor burned. The smoke curled into the night sky, carrying the last of Anakin Skywalker to the stars. The holocron's voice lowers, almost to a whisper. This was not the end. This was the breaking of a dam. The waters of war receded, but the riverbed was still cracked and dry. The seeds of the next storm had already been sown. And in the quiet that followed, the galaxy held its breath, as if unsure whether it had been freed, or merely given new chains to wear. Chapter 18. The Whisper Beyond Death. The holocron's final glow is faint, like a coal that has burned all night and is now surrendering to the cold. Its voice becomes a slow echo, as though it speaks not only to you, but to the ages. Death is not the end for those who are bound to the Force, but neither is it freedom. In the stillness of Endor's forests, the night carried a strange hush. Beyond the pyre's dying embers, Luke felt it, a presence not of flesh, but of light. He turned, and there they stood, OBI-1, smiling with quiet pride, Yoda, serene as the mountain wind, and beside them, the man he had just laid to rest. No mask, no armor, only Anakin Skywalker, as he might have been, face unlined by darkness, eyes bright as a twin sun dawn. He said nothing, yet in that gaze, Luke felt an ocean's worth of words. Gratitude, sorrow, love, and farewell. The spirit of the Chosen One drifted beyond the edge of time, unshackled from the cage of his own making, yet marked forever by the scars of his journey. In the currents of the Force, Anakin's voice whispered, not to Luke alone, but to all who might one day stand at the edge of the same abyss. The dark will always call to you. The light will not always answer. The choice will always be yours. The vision faded. The forest was only a forest again, and the holocron fell silent. Its last words come like the closing of a door. His story became myth, and myth became warning. The crystal dims to darkness. The voice is gone. Only the memory remains.